Hamas says its smuggling and terror tunnel network is twice as large as the Viet Cong's was at the height of the Vietnam War. Here's what Israel is doing to stop it. Is another Gaza war inevitable? Judging by the latest reports in the Israeli media, it might seem that way. At a funeral for 7 Hamas militants killed in a tunnel collapse, Hamas's Gaza-based chief Ismail Haniyeh declared that the so-called terror tunnels are a mainstay of the terrorist group's strategy against Israel. A senior Israeli defense official told reporters that Hamas has mostly rebuilt its tunnel infrastructure, which Israel destroyed in Operation Protective Edge in 2014. During the operation, the IDF demolished 32 tunnels, 14 of which crossed into Israel for the purpose of conducting terror attacks. Hamas publicly confirmed their ongoing efforts to rebuild the tunnels by praising its subterranean heroes, who are toiling day and night on reconstruction. Meanwhile, reports have trickled out of Gaza that 6 tunnels collapsed over the past 2 months, killing at least 13 Gazans. The debate further heated up when a sneak peek at a state comptroller report showed great dissatisfaction with how the Israeli Defense Ministry was handling the tunnel threat. Residents in communities near the Gaza border complain that they can hear and feel digging under their homes. In response, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised he would respond appropriately to all threats and will act very forcefully against Hamas, and with much more force than Protective Edge. Opposition leader Isaac Herzog, not to be outdone, called on Netanyahu to bomb the tunnels and destroy this threat. Why are we waiting? For terrorists with weapons drawn to emerge in a kibbutz? Jewish Home Leader Naftali Bennett similarly called for a preemptive attack on the tunnels. In any case, the public remains on edge. But is war inevitable? And is it the best option? Gazans have been using tunnels regularly since the mid-1990s, when they were dug under the Gaza, Egypt border in Rafah for smuggling purposes. By 2001, and again in 2004, 2005, Hamas terrorists used tunnels to plant explosives under IDF installations. In 2006, Hamas dug a tunnel into Israel near Kibbutz Kerem Shalom, ambushed a tank unit, kidnapped Corporal Gilad Shalit, who would be held in captivity for 5 years, and killed 2 of his fellow soldiers. By 2009's Operation Cast Lead, Hamas's use of tunnels had evolved into a clear threat. In 2012's Operation Pillar of Defense, the IDF targeted the tunnels as much as it did Hamas's rocket capabilities. In 2013, a large tunnel was discovered that led to an Israeli town. It was clearly intended for a large-scale terrorist attack. An even bigger tunnel was discovered later that year. During Protective Edge, a major tunnel infiltration aimed at the residents of a kibbutz near the Gaza border was thwarted just as terrorists were emerging on the Israeli side. 4 more such attacks would be interdicted, some with the Hamas fighters having already crossed into Israel. One attack was successful. 5 Israeli soldiers were killed. Hamas even used a tunnel to try to kidnap a soldier after a ceasefire had come into effect. The tunnel extended for over a mile, some of it deep into Israeli territory. What had originally been an operation to halt Hamas's rocket fire evolved into an operation to neutralize the tunnel threat. Between Israel's 2005 withdrawal from Gaza and June of 2007, when Hamas violently overthrew the Palestinian Authority and took control of the Strip, Israel had a border crossing agreement with the PLO to regulate the flow of people and goods into Gaza. The EU assisted in a similar arrangement between Gaza and Egypt. Even after the short-lived agreement was signed, however, Hamas and Islamic Jihad continued to launch rockets and mortar rounds from Gaza, including attacks on the border crossings using arms smuggled in via the tunnel system. Since Israel imposed a naval blockade on Gaza in 2007, meant to prevent Iranian arms from arriving in much greater quantities, the tunnel system became a lifeline for Hamas. Between 2005 and the eve of Protective Edge, Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists launched more than 11,000 rockets at Israeli civilians. Protective Edge saw another 4,700 rockets fired. All had been smuggled in whole or in part through Hamas's tunnels. Clearly, then, The tunnel infrastructure is both Hamas's primary military asset and a major threat to Israel's security. How can Israel effectively combat it? The history of warfare is, in essence, a history of constant adaptation to an enemy's capabilities. The tunnels were born out of this competition. They are classic examples of asymmetric warfare, in which a much weaker enemy takes advantage of the vulnerabilities of a militarily stronger force. But it is important to differentiate between the three distinct types of tunnels used by Hamas and explore their tactical and strategic importance. The original tunnels, as noted, were and still are used to smuggle arms and commercial goods from Egypt to Gaza. Hamas substantially expanded this infrastructure after 2007 and Israel's imposition of a blockade. At the time, it is estimated that there were as many as 2,500 such tunnels running between Gaza and Egypt in the area of Rafah. Their entrances were placed inside civilian buildings for the purpose of concealment. Most of these tunnels are deep underground, often dozens of feet, with reinforced concrete walls, electricity, and a communication infrastructure. Some are wide enough to accommodate vehicles. There are estimates that as much as $3 billion in goods were moved annually from Sinai into Gaza, avoiding the established import mechanism run by Israel, Egypt, and the Palestinian Authority. Hamas collects hefty taxes on most of these goods. However, following the fall of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood President Mohammed Morsi and Hamas's support for ISIS, linked terrorists in Sinai, Cairo cracked down. It constructed barriers, built a buffer zone, and flooded hundreds of tunnels. The Egyptian military claims to have destroyed over 1,500 such tunnels since current President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi came to power. A second type of tunnel is the tactical or defensive variety. These are meant to assist Hamas in its next war if Israel sends in ground troops. They form a subterranean web underneath Gaza and give fighters and commanders freedom of movement, allowing them to evade capture, hide from aerial assault, and maintain the element of surprise. Rockets, launchers, and ammunition are also stored in these tunnels, so Hamas can continue firing even while under aerial attack. Hamas commanders are said to have personal tunnels for themselves and their families. It is assumed that Hezbollah, whose underground capabilities were exposed during the Second Lebanon